Support for this podcast comes from the patrons at patreon.com/FML FPL. Okay, welcome to another Fireside Chat. This is Alon. Today I'm joined by Danny, aka Move78, aka Bullet from the Last Resort podcast, FPL Last Resort podcast. Sorry about that. How are you, Danny?
Yeah, I'm good, thanks, mate. Thanks for having me on. I was just, I'm just reminded now that it's obviously a fireside because you did that sort of calmer, and now I can see the little fire burning in the background and all your like quality editing and stuff. And yeah, I'm quite nervous actually. I'm a little bit scared because obviously I love the fireside and the whole concept of it. It's a bit scary being the one who's coming on it and stuff. But
I know what you mean. Yeah, it'll be okay. Yeah. I mean, let's start off with the easy stuff. I mean, I was just going to say before we dive into whatever we're diving into, where can people follow you, read your stuff, listen to your podcast, watch your podcast, do all that stuff out of the way?
Yeah, so we've started doing the FPL Last Resort podcast. I'm not very good at this. I'm not used to this sort of stuff because Rich does all this, doesn't he? With FPL Richie as well. So you can find me on either X or Blue Sky at Move78 FPL. I think that's it. I don't even know my own.
I think
app.
so, yeah. I'll link to everything also, yeah.
Cool, yeah. And FPL Richie as well, yeah. And FPL Last Resort. On YouTube, and find us on X. We've got a bit of a Blue Sky following. We probably post a bit more on X these days. I don't know, but it is what it is.
Yeah, so, who cares? Yeah, but it's a great podcast. I've been on it, I think, 3 times. If you haven't listened, definitely check it out. It's one of the only FPL podcasts that I find tolerable, to be honest. So that's a good start.
Love it.
I've been cutting FPL podcasts out of my diet, though. I've been stepping back from FPL, and I think it's leading to just more fun. I'm having more fun with the game, at least for the first few weeks of the season. I'm wondering where you're at so far. We're very early, obviously, first international break and going into Gameweek 4 here.
Yeah, I'm struggling a little bit. I mean, it's early, but you know, I've not had a good start. I'm on Wildcard this week, which is interesting. Yeah, it's really difficult. I don't know if we'll get onto that topic or not, or discuss the Wildcard at all. But I mean, lots of people have started badly, so it is what it is. You know, it's no problem. And then I did the Cunha captaincy last week, which obviously couldn't have gone any worse. You know, and I had Strand Larsen injured, I've got Cunha injured and Salah injured, and just various things like that. So, and I don't mind an early wild card. So I'm some terrible rank, like 6-7 million or something at the moment. But it's just all about, you know, always optimistic, kind of a natural optimist. I would be more optimistic if I was more confident on kind of the picks at the moment and the wild card and stuff. So we'll just have to see where it lands.
Well, that's what I'm kind of surprised to hear you're on Wildcard, because I do feel like I wouldn't call you like a safe player, but you do tend to go for like the nailed guys, the proven guys, right? And all of these sorts of things. And it does feel like there's a little bit of a lack of that right now out of all the FPL picks, especially with the Palmer injury, the Saka injury, like hard hitting premiums that are no longer picks. So what made you Wildcard, and how are you sort of structuring that so far?
Yeah, I mean, it's true. I think that the information that's sort of, or the challenge, you know, in terms of lack of information and stuff is more around the specifics. And so what I mean by that is, you know, I will still lean on the kind of long-term data and the long-term minutes. And I suppose minutes and players might be something we discuss, but, you know, I think the characteristics of a nailed player, or the sort of player that I like to have in my team, doesn't change at all really in terms of the 4 weeks, because I wouldn't base it on the first 3 weeks of this season really. I've obviously hopefully identified some things in players that I like, and some changes obviously, and you know, the def cam stuff like that. But in terms of how I would go about like structuring my team in terms of it, the price points and the shape of it, and the teams that are strong, and Liverpool and Arsenal, and as I say, the sort of characteristics of talismanic players remains the same really. So yeah, it's a mix really of the knowns and the unknowns and the specifics and that kind of thing. So it's and it's like you can build it around. I'm still building it around certain pretty nailed picks in my mind, like Salah, for example. Salah at the moment, I mean, that makes it easy because he's got the 2 great fixtures coming up at the moment. Bruno, even just because to me, for example, he just looks like the sort of a perfectly crafted FPL pick, which he kind of always has been, but now he's got death count sort of thing. And the defenders, I think, are a bit easier potentially. Touch wood. Again, it's still around price points anyway, but there are some people standing out that are cheap.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's relatively easy for me to build it around a certain structure at the moment. Because when you don't start particularly well, I hate being and I think that's probably true of all of us, but especially me and kind of slightly maybe more emotional people or intuitive players. That you kind of feel like you play a lot better when you're doing well, and it does make you a bit more anxious when you're not doing well, and it makes you sort of question everything twice and really think, because the wildcard is always so significant to me as like a fresh start. Like I love that, and that's also, I suppose, a little bit scary that because I don't normally wildcard quite this early, so I'm going all the way through to whatever, like what is it, January, February at least, until having that position again. Although we do get the 5 transfers capability these days, and we even get the extra 5 transfers with AFCON, which your mind doesn't really adjust to. So I'm still kind of
that it's basically a wild card. I mean, there's not like obviously you and everyone makes more than 5 changes, I think, on average per wild card, but you also don't have to. Like the idea that you could just change out your 5 worst players, or 5 worst picks, or 5 injured, suspended, whatever they are. It's like it's basically a wild card.
Yeah, I mean, the way I'm thinking about all those extra transfers at the moment and the future, and not having a wild card is probably also a little bit different this season in terms of, again, the knowns and the unknowns. In terms of the most significant pieces, i.e., Salah, Palmer, Haaland. I think there are question marks around that, and then therefore, like some people are arguing, hold the wild card till 13 or whatever it is when there's another swing, and obviously you get much more information about those kind of players, and that's fine. But also, you're also saving a wild card for like 13 weeks, which is not necessarily not necessarily a great thing to do in that regard either. There are points to get there now, but yeah, like. So that's almost what the wildcard is about for me at the moment, is securing those fringe players and being very kind of happy and content with like your defense, for example, and the goalkeeper and the cheaper picks, hopefully, to allow you to really maneuver those key price points, because obviously we're seeing potential changes already in terms of, for example, Salah versus Haaland from last season, which is inevitable because it was just like nothing. It was just like not even close between them last season, and that wasn't going to happen again quite like that. There's the Palmer thing, which is significant because I still think he's like just one of the best picks in the game, and the only thing that would change that is if he has some kind of career-long injury or something that's wrong with his hamstring permanently or something like that. But we don't really know what's going on there when he's going to be back. And then obviously Saka's injured, and the big thing is Isak. I mean, you're obviously a Liverpool fan. So these are the things in sort of 6, 7, 8 weeks' time that suddenly we've got so many of these big pieces: Isak, Haaland, Salah, Palmer, Saka. You've already got Bruno that you would expect to maybe stay there, and that's big in terms of moving those around and which 2 or 3 you want. So that's how I'm kind of seeing it holistically in my head, is that, I've played the wild card, which is a little bit worrying. I've got these 5 transfers. How I'm potentially, or hopefully, I can get to those. How can I use those so that I can navigate those key picks in the best way?
Right. Yeah. And I mean, it's both sides, right? I feel like it's an interesting time for wildcard for those premiums, but it's also, if you just sort of, I mean, maybe sorting by like team selection percentage or whatever is the best way to just get a sort of snapshot of this. But if you look at the sort of mid-price to cheap guys, there's a lot of shaking up there as well, right? Like there's 2 weeks ago, it was said like, oh yeah, get like Reinders, get, maybe Semenyo, get, I don't know off the top of my head, like all these other guys who feel like, oh, these are very secure. I can hold them. No warts here at all. And now it's like, there's not that many, right? There's SARS hurt, and Kudus never shoots, and Spurs got new players anyway. It's very hard to pick those. So you almost need to be fully flexible in all price brackets, I feel like, on a wild card now. But and the thing that I wanted to pick on what you said that I think is interesting, just some, daytime thinking that I had to myself is like, I had these two thoughts, and you kind of just touched on both of them, but they do rub up against each other, which is, one is, to play well, I need to have fun. And I think in so many words, you kind of said the same thing. It's like you're playing when you're having fun and you're playing well, and vice versa. And then the other thing is that you, like, you're supposed to, that's kind of like a clunky way of putting it, but you're supposed to not care about your rank and just play well, right? You're supposed to, in an ideal, you're a robot who's built to do well in FPL. You only care about the process. You only care about the picks and the data, and you don't even look at your points or look at your rank because that'll come, right? But that's not reality, right? Like, it's still, I believe XG or whatever, but when my captain scores a banger, I'm not like, well, it was a 0.1 XG chance, so I'm not even going to celebrate. Like, it's the fucking best feeling in the world, right? Like, and if you're not celebrating that, it's almost like, what are you playing for, right? So you have to celebrate the fun, but you have to also sort of balance a little bit of like, okay, but what's like actually happening, and what are the actual processes to make sure that I'm continuing to play well. You know what I mean? How it kind of rubs up.
Totally, totally. And I'm kind of like that. I mean, yeah, we all are trying, but I think to me, like, having fun, of course, you especially at the start of the season. So of course, yeah, you want to be doing well.
Yeah,
that's a big thing, and you want to be getting lucky. But actually, like, I feel like I'm at my kind of happiest or most content, and we're probably all the same, when I've got the least to think about. And so that doesn't really matter whether I'm 8 million or 10 million. It matters about what my team is for next week and how I feel about those players. And that's where I'm at. That's where I'm most content. So I've kind of got this attentional problem in life where I find it very difficult to shift from one thing to another, and I shift things too quickly. It's kind of an attention deficit type thing. But when I'm there, I need to stay there, and before I can move on. So I'm always late for everything. Like, I was late for meeting you tonight. And so, like, obviously that manifests in every single FPL position. And then if I suddenly start thinking about, do I want them, or am I happy with them? Like, we all I can sit there in a hole for like 3 hours staring at all these different variations because I can't leave it alone. And of course, Wildcard, for example, gives you the opportunity to like reset all those decisions and reset your mind, which is why you kind of. So it's not so much that I want to do really well next week. It's that I want to go into next week without any decisions, without feeling, that's the process, isn't it? I want to go into next week feeling content and feeling relaxed and going to bed at night, kind of regardless of what happens. Because if I do that in the right way and make long-term picks, and then I should be doing that every week for a good few weeks until shit hits the fan and I get 3 or 4 or 5 players injured. You know what I mean? So that's kind of probably a really obvious thing to say. But for me, FPL is always about putting fires out in terms of decisions and anxieties and being clear. And so that probably is even more challenging and difficult when you're on a wild card earlier on. And I'm sort of seeing that now a little bit. And also, you kind of have you have less money and stuff like that, less budget, although, you can make a bit more, all this sort of stuff. So that's how I sort of enjoy myself. If I go into a weekend and do badly, but I've gone into the weekend and I'm really happy with my team, and I still, then, even if they all played shit, I'd still sort of feel okay because I went into it really happy with them, and I'm probably happy with them next week, kind of thing. So, yeah, I know. So, but obviously, with every week that goes by, when we get to like game week 2020, then it's like, yeah, you need to be doing well as well. Because even if you've got a good team, if you're doing shit, you hate, then you really start to hate things. Then you feel it's like unjust, and you're like, I've had that before. Where you feel I've been happy with my team every week for fucking 20 weeks, 30 weeks, and I can't move, and it's so frustrating. So.
I think that happens to Walsh at some point every season. He's just like, my 11 is untouchable, and my rank is like 2.5 million, and I don't know what the hell's going on. And at some point, those have to converge, and like there has to be some tough decisions have to be made. But yeah, I mean, you mentioned that like you sort of lean on the long-term data and like lean on the long-term like minutes and stuff like that for the picks. I'm curious, like, because whenever I've been on your podcast, we always talk about sort of process, but we never actually get into the weeds of like, okay, so what do you find valuable? Like, what data are you actually looking at? Because I think that is turned into the type of thing where there's too much noise and everyone kind of has a different cocktail of stuff that they read or listen to or watch or whatever. And that is like what's important to them individually, rather than, back in the day, it was sort of just like, you go on FFS and you see who has the most shots in the box. And that's like the one stat that everyone looks at. And other than eye test, there's that, you know what I mean?
Mm. Yeah. I mean, I'm sorry, I'm going off in my head now into a bit of a deep one, starting really far back for how to explain that, because data isn't really the right word for me. I mean, I do use data and look at it, and I use every resource that I can and kind of allow it to or contribute to my process. I look at things like FPL Review, which is brilliant, and I looked at Solio, and I do look at it. It doesn't really dictate my decisions, I wouldn't say. Of course, it contributes to them. And it's weird, actually, because I'm just thinking about it now. Before those kind of models, I would look at, for example, FF Scout more often and look at the kind of XG, and I actually want to remind myself to do that more often, because it's just a different way of viewing like players and just going, oh, it's like last night when I was on the pod with Rich, and I was like, I know it's only 3 weeks data, again, sample size and all that stuff, but I was just having a quick look, and I was like, oh, right, Sunderland are like, even though they've had good fixtures, they've been like decent defensively, and I was like, I hadn't seen that anywhere, and I started to look at those sort of tables myself. So because I don't have a lot of room for stuff, because I approach the game quite heuristically, like, and on a kind of meta level and holistic, like that's how I like to think. And I was thinking about this before, and I don't want to go too much off onto a tangent, but did you ever read before Kahneman's book, Thinking Fast and Slow?
No, everyone has told me, and this has come up like multiple times recently. Like in our Discord, like someone a few days ago was like, "Of course you've read this," and I was like, "No, I haven't read it. I've heard of it, but yeah."
Yeah, it was years ago that I read it, but it's one of these things that stays with you, because I think it came out in 2012, 2011 or 2012.
All right, I gotta read this. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a must read. I mean, it's incredibly dense, but he's really good. So he breaks it down into very small chapters. But it is something that I think about quite a lot in relation to FPL, because basically Kahneman broadly describes like system 1 and system 2 thinking, and system 1 thinking is kind of intuitive and fast and kind of it's just automatic and it's kind of lazy, and system 2 is more effortful and for example, if you see like 5 times 5 written down, you just use system 1 because you just know what it is. You just, it's 25. I don't just think about it. And if you see 273 divided by 19 or whatever, you can't use system 1. You're forced to use system 2, which not everybody likes to have to do. In fact, most people don't like to have to do it because it requires effort and conscious thought. And you're like, oh, it's just with me. So I am kind of naturally more of a kind of system 1 thinker. That doesn't mean that, so he describes that we all use both, of course, and we're all on a bit of a spectrum. And of course, there are lots of times when I like to use system 2 and I like to get stuck into a problem or a crossword or read a book and do all sorts of things. But for whatever reason, when it comes to FPL and all of its like intangibles and, and all of its kind of complexity, I like to approach it with, I do have a more, since I was born, I've always had an inclination towards system 1 thinking and being a bit more intuitive.
Yeah.
And using insight and kind of gut feel a little bit. And so, I mean, what that means for me is that to kind of work with that and not just sort of combat it, because that can obviously lead to kind of lots of problems. I think a lot of players think like that and use system 1 and intuitively, and it can be a bit of a roller coaster if you let that run wild. You are kind of a little bit more vulnerable to cognitive biases and stuff and emotion.
Right.
Yeah, and system 2 thinkers are, again, people that have that inclination are naturally a little bit more analytical and rational. And it's not so much that I'm not analytical or rational, but that's a more automatic process for those sort of guys. You sort of hardcore analytics, for example, are more system 2 thinkers. My dad is a very much a system 2 thinker. That's why he's a chess player, whereas I didn't have the attention span for that growing up. I was switching between things all the time. And so, yeah, so that's how I kind of think about it a lot. When I look at other people managing, if I think about like LR, for example, he's like very much a system 1 thinker. And so I think system 1 thinkers do also have sort of strengths as well. We can have, insight and intuition. It's not just that we're like, that is, you've sort of spent your whole life thinking like that, like kind of building patterns and trying to see things in people that allows you to think heuristically and more lazily, if you see what I mean. So what I do, it's a long-winded way of saying is my approach to the game is I do kind of build those heuristics myself, but make them really quite powerful and kind of simple. So, minutes, for example, and a talismanic player is one of them. A lot of people, or most people, like as in the masses, still don't, for example, in my view, really understand what it means to be a good minutes player. And I don't mean to sound like, condescending in that way, because I think it's really interesting, because I think it's actually more complex than people realize. So to take that for an example, you go back to your original question in terms of what data do you use? It's me. My first port of call is actually, and I can't even help it, is these heuristics, like who is absolutely nailed. What does that nailedness mean? Are they, in terms of set pieces, in terms of their avenues to points? Are they on penalties? When I say nailed, is it 90 minutes every game? And it's not because someone else is injured, or because, a new manager's come in, or we're saying, oh, this guy's got good minutes because we think it's good minutes for 4 or 5 weeks. That's not reached that threshold in terms of my heuristic of what minutes means and what a talisman means.
I just want to cut you off, because isn't it funny nowadays that we say he's absolutely nailed? That's what nailed is supposed to mean. Nailed is supposed to mean absolutely nailed, but now it's gotten this blur over it, where people are like, he's pretty nailed, he's kind of nailed. It's no. Nailed means the rule of thumb or whatever in our Discord is, if you have to ask, he's not nailed.
Absolutely.
Right? No one has ever said, is Bruno nailed? No one has ever asked that question. It's not even is Mo nailed? It never enters the conversation. Yeah.
Absolutely. But then even, to take, for example, I don't know, you can probably think of examples better than me, but somebody would say I don't know, last season, I don't know why, in fact, I don't know, someone like a Darwin or a rotation risk at Liverpool. Let's just say someone got injured, and we kind of know that they're nailed now, or we think that they're going to definitely play for 4 or 5 weeks. People will still, and people will describe that player as nailed, or having great minutes, whereas not to me. I don't care whether we think or you think he's nailed, or even if I think he's nailed for 4 or 5 weeks, he isn't a nailed player. So it's a different thing. That's still to me, I still see that as a transfer down the line at some point. I don't care when it is. I don't care if it's in 4 weeks or 10 weeks or 15 weeks. It's a transfer isn't just a transfer and 4 points that I effectively see it as. It's also a headache, or one of those anxieties or decisions that I've just said to you. I want my whole approach to be erasing those. I don't want to create one for myself in 4 or 5 weeks. And, with minutes, again, if you've got someone who is, in your view, has reached that threshold, who's absolutely nailed, whoever that is, it doesn't matter. It doesn't need to be a Bruno. It could be a Senesi or a Paquetá or someone like that. I have 100% of that player. That's how I kind of see it. It's I have 100% of that player. And if you want to mess around with a Foden or someone who's nailed for a few weeks, or a Yeri or whatever that new guy's signed, or even a Kudus or a Brennan Johnson, or anyone, or even players that I can't think of right now that may be more nailed than that. It's a bit like playing cards. It's a bit like playing whist or something. And I've got 10 cards and you've got 7 or something, or 8 for a player you think is got good minutes, but we're talking 70 or 80, or they might improve. I've got 100% of that player. And if we're playing against each other with those cards, eventually I'm going to start winning. So you're going to need aces. You're going to need aces in that deck. You must be picking that minutes risk player because you think they're really good. They're going to get ahead. You're actually going to have aces in that deck.
Which sometimes you do in FPL, right? Where that's those little avenues are some of the most, I think, fun moments of FPL, when you just say, this is a very bad example because it's not very fun owning an Everton center back, but I have Michael Keane, right? There was a world where I just hit 2 8-pointers and a 4-pointer for DEFCONs. And I'm just holy shit, that was the best game week 1 pick ever. Eventually, he will be a transfer out. There's no doubt at all. Branthwaite will come back. He will be relegated to the bench. He will never play again. But there are moments where, you captain Aguero and he scores 4 or something like that. And that is a calculated risk, but it's a huge risk because, like you said, someone like Aguero, it's it's in your analogy, it's like having 3 cards versus someone with 10 cards, and you drew all aces. You have 3 aces. Yeah.
Yeah, totally. And And of course, this is what I mean. Like, I'm going to sound really boring when I say all this. It's not like I don't. It's not like I don't ever do that, because I do. And I've captained Gareth Bale a couple of years ago, and the Spurs, and and done that sort of thing loads of times. And obviously Cunha this week. There are obviously different things that you add to that. But I think with me, for that threshold, it would be even less likely with me that I would have to see that person, even if there were maybe a minute's risk objectively. It'd be someone that I think very strongly is actually going to become really secure in minutes straight away, or is going to be, or people just don't realise how good their minutes are yet. It's much less likely I'm going to bring someone in where, and I think the minutes are good for 4 or 5 weeks, but I know that they're then going to drop, because that's such a big thing for me. Because again, there are so many players in the game where I have 100% of them. And it means that in that 4 or 5 weeks, I've got an extra 4 points than you maybe, because I don't have to make a transfer. And I've got an extra transfer, so I might have 2 or 3, and then I've got more strength and maneuverability, where you, for example, don't if you did that player. Yeah. All these kind of things, I already have all of that. And the other thing is, like, people are natural optimists. So not only do you, if you're playing with me and you need to hit those aces, or you need to hit the minutes, for example, you not only need to get the minutes, but they also need to be good.
Yeah.
And that's just like, it doesn't always happen like that at all. I was thinking, like, there's a guy called Flapjack, who's a great guy on Twitter, and he's a funny guy, and he's a great guy, and he's a good manager and stuff. And you might have seen it come up, because like all season last season, he was going on about Rico Lewis, and he picked him really early. So it's kind of an example, because he was right in the end, in terms of like his objectively, his minutes were shit for like 8-10 weeks. Yeah, you couldn't deny it. But after about 10 weeks, it was like, oh, actually, his minutes are actually good, and they were like good all season, pretty much.
He was just shit.
He just wasn't good. So it's like, he played for Man City and he had great minutes. And so Flapjack had made this huge bet and given away this whole card. He's only had 14 cards out of his 15 for 10 weeks, really. Made this massive bet on this City player, which is like, wow, great. And he did play every game, but he was shit.
Yep.
Because you have to not only play, but you have to be good.
Yep.
So there's so many things going on that kind of contribute to that.
And there's an interesting relationship there too, with the playing and being good, is that also could affect your minutes, right? This didn't happen with Rico Lewis, but there's every world that Flapjack makes the bet comes good, aka he's playing, not that he's getting points, and then he's playing badly and eventually loses his minutes again, and then the bet loses again. A bet that has already won can then lose. That's just like what FPL is. It's very like fluid in that way. It's very interesting.
Exactly. Yeah. It's so fragile. And actually, just on that last point, just thinking about that now, it's kind of probably a little bit annoying. I guess, I don't know. We'll have to see how this kind of plays out over the season. But the DEFCON thing, so that minutes thing for me, it has been an edge potentially for me, or for anyone else, not just me. But like, I like to see it that way. Doesn't mean that it is. Doesn't mean that I'm better. It's just that I like to see that as a bit of an edge. And it has been that way. But the DEFCON thing maybe gets people more aware, or a little bit moving more towards minutes and nailedness, because obviously you get something else for that now. And,
right,
playing for longer gets you more DEFCONs, and maybe it forces people to think slightly differently about players. We'll have to see how that works out, because maybe they go too safe, and maybe you get too many Andersons and Stacks and all these sort of guys. Who knows? But I think it probably will change how people think about minutes a little bit.
Yeah, here's an interesting study for someone that's not us, that wants to learn more about FPL. I just thought of this on the fly, but if you could go back in time and build your Gameweek 1 team with everything you know now, I think that off the top of your head, that sounds really easy. You know the results of all the games. You're not going to pick Verts. You're going to dodge guys that didn't score points. You're not going to pick Palmer. You're not going to pick Saka, whatever. But how well is that team actually going to do from this point on is a different question, right? We'll all have like Semenyo, and we'll all have, I don't know who else randomly scored a lot of points.
Senesi,
Enzo, or like João Pedro, whatever. And you'll have a shit ton of points. You'll be Timber, right? Exactly. You'll be top 1,000 or something right now, but I don't know if that means you'll have a good team going forward. I don't know if you'll look at that team in Gameweek 4 and be like, oh, I'm fucking stacked, and like I don't have to use my wild card. My team is perfect. Like, it's not really the case. And you would still make a ton of changes even if you knew, which goes back to, well, not goes back to, maybe moves on to like your big thing, I feel like, is always if you can roll or not. Like rolling free transfers is another one of your big sort of heuristics. Like you want to look at your team, and the first thing you think about is like, can I roll? Do I need to make a transfer or not? Basically, right? And I was just using my team as an example because I'm thinking about my team, right? So my team is pretty good, and I can pull it up if you want to see it right now. But my team in general is pretty good. My worst pick is De Kuiper, who's my fifth defender right now, who I could turn into a starting defender because Michael Keane will eventually lose his place, or Ruder, who's my seventh attacker. My eighth attacker plays for Millwall, so he's not really an FPL pick. My seventh attacker, Ruder, who's clearly not been good, right? He won a penalty in Game Week 1. He randomly didn't start in Game Week 2 because he was injured and, fuckface didn't tell us. And then he played 20 minutes in Game Week 3. No one would ever wildcard in Ruder or transfer in Ruder right now. But I was looking at my team and I was like, all right, if I had to do it over again, like what has actually changed since Game Week 1? And the only thing that maybe has changed is I didn't put enough stock into the fact that, Hertzler is a bastard and he'll never tell the truth, and I'll never know if my player's starting, and I'll never know if my player's injured. But the other thing that changed is like they sold O'Reilly, and he's kind of the only 10 on the team. And I still kind of believe his minutes are good. I wouldn't say he's absolutely nailed or whatever. I still think his minutes are good, and he's cheap, and he's on an attacking team. So my question for you is just sort of like, what kind of strings are you pulling on to figure out whether you make a transfer or not? Because we've all been in this situation where it feels bad to hold a player because they feel like bad picks. But there's also the alternative of that where it's like, Ruder's not a good example of this, but maybe, Wood of seasons past of being like, well, he's nailed, he's on pens, I like him, etc. And he's just an easy hold. You know what I mean? Because I feel like there's that FOMO thing of like, I'm going to miss opportunities if I don't strike while the iron's hot. But like sometimes holding is the best move you can make.
Yeah, I guess I just kind of view it differently. Like I view and again, as a heuristic. So apologies if this sort of thing is like obvious or repetitive. So I'm trying to explain how I see it. But that heuristic, that kind of not absolute, but of, for example, rolling a transfer. I view it as incredible amount of strength. Possibly, and sometimes I push things further than they are to actually get me to that place. So I possibly view it as too much almost strength, and I'm sometimes maybe too patient. But I think you're guaranteeing yourself strength in the future. So I'm always thinking about like, how strong can I be in the future? You have to, I think with FPL, like you almost have to sacrifice in a sense. You almost have to buy time to be in a stronger position in the future. If you do that in the right way, when you get to that position, you're in a stronger position for longer. Like it sort of you sort of sell a little bit of like EV or expected points, or a little bit of that now to get more in the future, is how I kind of always see it. And so the very basis is, do I think that player is going to play? Do I think they're going to start? Because the other thing is like having a wild card, like in your position, and like it kind of in a way buys you more time as well. I mean, the things work in both ways. You can kind of, I always play a little bit more loosely, which is not a good thing really sometimes, especially if I know a wild card is approaching.
Yeah.
And that was kind of what happened, like even with the Cunha captaincy, which I felt very good about and confident about because I really rate the player.
It was a good pick. I mean, anyone that says that was a bad captaincy is insane. That was a good captain.
That's just bollocks. But and I don't know this, I haven't really thought about it until now, but I probably wouldn't have done it if I'd already played my wild card.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Because it's just not as robust a move. It's just not as solid a move. And you're not, that's the thing in terms of playing loosely, when you know you've got a wild card in the future to kind of reset. But that also makes sense in a way, because I almost went triple United, for example. So it kind of makes sense optimally. If you know you're going to wildcard next week, you go triple United at home to Burnley because you're maximising your kind of potential points. You know what I mean? But I didn't know for certain I was going to. So that's another story. But
yeah.
So I mean, that's rule number one for me: is do I think they're going to play, or they've got a good chance to play, or do I think they should play? So I think you mentioned Rutter, and that's kind of a hard one for me because I've not really looked into Brighton. I don't really know what his situation is, so I can't really give my example there.
I'm trying to just use him as like sort of, a general sort of heuristic for a player who's not absolutely nailed, but will likely play, and they're not great, but they're not bad, and the team's not great, but they're not bad. You know what I mean? It's sort of like, I feel like he's a almost perfect, like nothing player. Like he's on no one's radars, but he's not bad. And he's also, no one is transferring him in. No one's wildcarding him. No one's even considering probably any Brighton players, honestly. Like you're on wildcard. Have you considered a single Brighton player?
I have considered them. I mean, funnily enough, because again, what contributes to your process is models as well, and they're really big on the models. So, for example,
Brighton are?
Yeah. So, for example, like Jorginho, Minter, and Mitoma are like nailed in every, like if you ask Review to do your wildcard now,
I'm blown away at that.
It would give you 2 Brighton midfielders, which is fascinating, isn't it? Because it's not like the fixtures look amazing or anything like that. So that's actually been something I've been thinking about quite a lot. In terms of why that is, because that is how I use analytics and models. Is okay, that's what it thinks. Why does it think that? And can I get myself into a position where I can understand or agree with it in any way, or at least close, and get them to into my thinking? I mean, maybe come back to that point in a second. But I think to answer your question as well is, I do another one of many heuristics is that I kind of know and have to know how much randomness there is at this time of the season, and then actually that should be part of a decision kind of process in that, and kind of embracing that total randomness and that lack of knowledge. And it's hard to kind of put into words what I mean, but to give an example, I'm playing Fan Team again this year, like I always do, but then I always forget about it after about 9 weeks, which is really annoying.
I don't know what Fan Team is. Can you give me a brief?
So Fan Team is basically the same as FPL, pretty much, but you pay to play it and you can win loads of money.
Oh, okay.
So I always play it and then annoyingly forget to carry on playing it and just play the game where you win a notepad and a stress ball. You know what I mean?
For finishing, top 0.001% of the world. Yeah.
Ridiculous. But so that's kind of like my Gumar team. Again, to go back to that point, because and it helps you to be even more logical and embrace that randomness. So, for example, on that you can now enter like 5 teams and I can't remember what it was. And I think it was last week or the week before. And my teams were such that I would never have done this in my FPL team, but it was because I was so logical with my fan team because I care about it less. I think like in a couple of the teams, it was like Mateta or someone that I brought in or a striker or I think maybe even João Pedro, someone who I felt kind of good about and might have been part of my FPL team. And with the other team, I either had less money or I just wanted a bit of variation or something. I was forced into a slightly different move and I brought in Evan Nilsson. And going into that week, my sort of emotional FPL brain is telling me, well, that team, the Evan Nilsson team, is not going to do very well because I'm like, this doesn't look great to me at the moment. But it was completely logical for me to make that move. And of course, whatever week it was, last week or the week before, he was the only one who scored.
Yeah, last week he scored. Yeah.
It wasn't versus João Pedro, but it was versus like the other guys. And so it's a constant reminder, and it's like, wow, my gut felt that was like he wasn't going to do anything. And of course, he was the only one who did because he's still objectively quite a good pick and random. There's so much randomness now. And so when you've got like Brighton players, especially when you've got a wildcard in the bank, when you've got, for example, Brighton players or anyone that you kind of like or feel good about, or maybe other people don't have, if you think they're going to play, that's a really big factor in me being like, wow, yeah, like it gives me a chance to buy more time and just roll under the transfer, just get to another week and just see what happens. Like, if that makes any sense at all, I kind of naturally view it optimistically because again, I always say it's about who you've got and who you've not got.
Right.
Which is really obvious and sort of stupid thing to say, and I've said it before, but most people play thinking about who they've not got and play out of fear and play out of like worrying about what could go wrong, which is kind of understandable. Me, for example, without João Pedro, who's like 65% owned.
I think it's natural, right? It's also, I think like social media, whatever, like factors into that, right? Because you only see people being like, oh, blah, blah, blah scored, or, Cucurella, another clean. And you just see guys you don't have constantly scoring points. No one's talking about, the rest of their team, which might be bad.
Yeah. And, they might have a good fixture next week. So then it's doubly scary. But if I've got a guy in the same position who maybe hasn't done any goals yet, and I maybe think isn't quite as good, but they've got a good fixture, I'm playing them. I'm rolling it because I get more time. I get another transfer. Hopefully, I can roll it, and I still have a player with a good fixture, and random shit happens. So I'll almost never make that kind of move.
Right.
It has to be really bad. Which can be bad sometimes, with like Chris Wood last season or João Pedro this season or, Danny Ings a few years ago. And you just every week and you're like, oh my God, it's actually happening every single week. They're getting 9 points every fucking week and I'm not, you know what I mean? So, yeah. I'd have to see your team in terms of your actual question. Because
I mean, let's not focus on that. But somewhere where I definitely wanted to go and touch on, because we talked about before recording the Walsh and LR pod and the DEF CONs, and obviously Walsh is on Wildcard. I'm talking to him tomorrow on the Patreon episode. It's all going to be about his Wildcard, and he is the most DEF CONs pilled person I think probably in the world right now. And he's just going for basically 11 DEF CONers plus Mo and Haaland. How DEF CON pilled are you, or are you not? Is I guess the question I'm trying to ask.
I mean, I definitely think it's significant, and I've definitely brought it into my thinking. It already was, that's I guess, and it had to be because we looked at just the numbers from last season, and I think most of us, the engaged managers did go into the season heavily thinking about DEF CON. That's why I had Murillo. Obviously, the Forest guys were the most annoying because Murillo was at the cost of having a good goalkeeper, just because of all the DEF CONs instead of having a Williams or something,
And then they get none, and they sack the manager, and here we are. Yeah.
Yeah, and then they get none and all that sort of stuff. But it still needs to be a blend. So first of all, it needs to be a blend in terms of the DEF CON. So for example, Palace is a good one where with Palace, they usually start badly, and you just never really, in my experience, you never really know what you're going to get with Palace. So that seems to be changing. You don't know who's going to turn up, and they're sort of amazing for 6 weeks and then crap for 10 weeks, whatever. I think that is changing a bit because the manager's so good and everyone's fit, blah, blah, blah. So what I'm saying is Palace is one where we know that they're a really good defensive team when they've got everyone. When they're on it, they're just an insanely good defense anyway. And then they've also got players who are DEF CON in. So that goes up really quite significantly. For example, a Crow or a Richards. And it's the same with Anderson, for example, Fulham. The really interesting thing is that, I mean, it's significant because it closes that gap a lot with some of those bigger guys, like a Gabriel for something, relative to the other guys. The gap is nowhere near as big now, which makes it interesting. So I think you can get more value in defense. And that's the thing, is because there are so many defenders who, it's weird. It's same with midfielders, actually thinking about it, because there are lots of defenders and midfielders who are very good players and picks anyway, or in good defenses, but then they also have DEF CON. It kind of just feels like we're just going to end up with more points.
Just the floor goes up and raises everything. Yeah.
Yeah, it's not a huge change. I understand, for example, Walsh's point. How do I sort of say this? But I don't think the bet on DEF CON needs to be as extreme. It's not like it has a big ceiling anyway. For example, if you're doing 5 at the back, I get it. But if it's 5 at the back, it's still 5 guys who you're hoping get the clean sheet, which is the big 4 points, and get the DEF CON, which is the 2. And it's fine. Okay, they're really solid. Yeah, they are solid. But it doesn't have much of a ceiling there. And I still think there's always room to look for. We've got guys who are 4-5, for example, who are really good defenses, good fixtures, DEF CON. And we can still spend money on where the big points and the big ceilings are, and I don't know.
Yeah,
thinking about that draft, it's like Palmer 4 goals in a game or whatever last season, or someone like that who's not even in his thinking, and there's no root to it. It's yeah. Sorry, go on.
No, I was just gonna, and Palmer's a good example, right? That's 10 games of DEF CONs to get to catch up to 4 goals, right? I mean, Walsh and I will talk about it tomorrow, like I said, but yeah, I'm kind of. I guess I've sort of had this loosely in my head for probably the whole time I've ever played FPL, which is, your game week 1 team is going to have probably 50% bad picks. And I think your wild card's also just going to have, probably 7 out of 10 outfield players are probably good and 3 are probably bad. Just on average, because we know so little and things change and yada, yada. So I do think, I think we're pretty aligned on that, actually. I agree it's significant. I agree those 4-5, 5-0 defenders who are on good teams like Senesi, like Lacroix, and whatever, who also get defcons. They're just automatics, right? Like they're like non-negotiables probably in a wildcard team. I think it gets a little tricky elsewhere. And I also don't think that just because it's been this way for 3 weeks, it's definitely the way forward for the rest of the season. I just don't think anything in FPL is that simple. But yeah, it's something to pay attention to. It'll be interesting if I think he will fully go for it. That's Walsh's style, is kind of, you know, fully dive in for what he believes in, whether that's, you know, tripling on a defense or whatever. So we'll see, you know, and the points. And what he's thinking is that 10 weeks from now, this will be every team. That's his genuine feelings on the thing. Is 10 weeks. He has the team that everyone will get in 10 weeks. We'll see.
I mean, I don't see it, but it's going to be an interesting experiment. I mean, and I think there's obviously some, like I say, I think there's some truth in it. And I think it's really interesting. I think it's great, and it could be. Yeah, it could be. I don't know. I just had a sort of an example, just one example in my head thinking about this quite. So maybe because I'm on Wildcard this week, in terms of thinking about Defcon or Defcon-y type players, for me, it's quite an interesting one. It's something like a Semenyo versus a Paquetá. I think that's quite interesting in terms of your approach to the game and
polar opposites, right?
Yeah.
I mean, yeah.
And I'm not sure which one's better, and maybe Paquetá is better long term. I don't know, but again, as the kind of ever optimist, I'm still looking for goals, and then he's someone, for example, that I do believe in quite strongly, and he does put up the numbers and the non-pen XG, and he is talismanic, but he doesn't have the set pieces or the penalties, and he doesn't have Defcon.
Yeah.
And I still think that's quite interesting. Obviously, the price is important. For me, it would still be like Semenyo if I could maneuver it. I'm not. Again, you have to actually get Defcon, like you just said, kind of thing. It's quite a big bet there. You still have to do it. It's not easy.
Elliot Anderson getting 11 gets you 0 points. He got 0 Defcon points. Doesn't matter. Yeah.
Which is crazy. I mean, can you imagine how frustrating? That's why you've got them, just to get some Defcons. So yeah, it will be interesting. But you know, and I agree with him. I think myself, I was making that shift, that it has gone like that. It is a bit more even than I thought when you get the right players. If you're talking about a Lacroix, for example, I mean, I did a draft team just last week. So when we had the information, and with a draft team, obviously you don't really change your team.
Yeah.
And so for me, in my head, I was thinking much more like Walsh, where it's like, where a team I don't change is like, hang on a minute, like I'm going to go into the Defcon here because these guys just need to play every week. They need to be the 90-minute nailed guys in draft, and Defcon is going to be really nice in draft if these guys are nailed. And that was my team. I ended up with like a 5-3-2. I had Lacroix, Anderson, Senesi, just all these Defcon guys.
Yeah.
And so it's quite interesting that I went even more. I was like right where Walsh is in a draft game where you can't necessarily change your players.
Right. You can't chase, sort of a ceiling of a good run or find someone who's just going to score a bunch in a short amount of time or something. Yeah, it makes more sense, actually. I mean, but it works both ways, right? Because you could say that that's better for draft and not as good for FPL, but at the same time, if you make that team in FPL and then 5 weeks from now you have 5 frees, you can change. You can, change the strategy. Okay, I'm going to get this guy for this run, this guy for this run, hold off on the Defcon for a little bit, go back to the Defcon, whatever. So, yeah, I mean, as usual, which is one of my big frustrations in FPL, I mean, a lot of the Paquetá-Semenyo debate will be decided upon nothing to do with Paquetá and if they get penalties or not. Literally, that's the majority of his points will come from if they win penalties or not, which I absolutely despise. But it is, a proven formula for getting points. Like Bruno gets a lot of penalties and he gets over 150 every single year. But yeah, I think Semenyo is the exact type that Walsh is completely ignoring. And I think 3 games, short, small sample, all the required things I have to say before I, say something like this. But it's possible he's having a breakout season, right? He's getting the same amount of shots he did as last year, but they're way better shots in the middle of the box. Huge chances. Like he could have a Wissa season Where, yeah, he's no pens, but he scores 19 goals or whatever Wissa scored last year, right? Like, that is in the realm of possibility at this point. And it's not like they've had easy fixtures either. But, yeah, I mean, there's also a chance that, West Ham win 8 pens and Paquetá is not hitting 11 DEFCONs. He's hitting 12. And they keep some cleans and he gets some open play stuff and he's just a cheat code and he gets 180. That's totally possible too. So very, very hard, very interesting to like pit those specific players, I think, against each other. They're sort of in the same price bracket too. Yeah.
Yeah, very interesting. I mean, obviously penalties, like you always say, it's so random. And that's
so
where
random.
That's where when I'm looking at, for example, non-pen XG and stuff and Semenyo at home and those sort of chances he's getting, that's where I do lean towards. It feels more repeatable to me than...
Yeah.
I mean, I don't get me wrong. Again, Paqueta's an amazing pick. Again, he is cheaper. So as that example...
Amazing pick. That's not what we're saying at all. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. It's just that example is about what you look for, isn't it, in a player? And I still, if they're at that threshold, like you say, if I think they're going to have a real breakout, I'm leaning towards that. I'm leaning towards getting on that potential ceiling, and because it can quickly run away from you as well. If you're sitting there relying on DEFCON and penalties, and you get a load of 10s and 11 DEFCONs and you don't win any penalties, you can get away from you very quickly. Players who can streak, and players who can potentially hat trick, and players who can get 2 goals, even if it's like a Reinders or someone who has the ability to get 2 or 3 goals in a game, or 3 or 4 returns. That's scary. Things can get away from you very quickly if you're just like, you've got a solid team, a draft team, but it's so solid that I know the avenues aren't in open play so much. I don't
know. Yeah. I mean, West Ham got 3 penalties, I think, entire of last season. Like, are you happy with that? And like, just to illustrate how random penalties are, Brighton already have fucking 3. They've won in every single game so far, and more than half the teams don't have 1.
And you do have to. I know it is random, but you do have to think a little bit about, if you are betting on a penalty take, like who the team is first of all. And they're a good team. So obviously Brighton are a good team. They're very good at attacking. They just beat City. I mean, they beat they're incredible.
And they have tons of dribbly boys and tricksters.
I mean, Minter and Mitoma, as simple as that. And when I think about Bruno, for example, at United, the first person that I think about isn't necessarily Cunha or Mbeumo. It's actually Ahmad.
Someone like that.
Yeah, he's incredible, fast, dribbly. He's so hard to actually... When someone's small like him, they just move. All the limbs move faster than yours.
Yeah.
That happens so often with him. I mean, I just think if he plays all the time, he's going to win a lot of penalties, and that feels like quite a nice flaw in terms of winning penalties, because they do have those players. Whereas West Ham, you've got Bowen, who's like a big, strong guy. He's not, but his legs aren't moving so fast, someone can't keep up. Who else have they got?
I mean, Somerville could win a pen or something. Yeah, but you're relying on a lot of Paquetá, honestly. But there's not that many. There's not like, you didn't even mention Ruder, who won a pen for Brighton this year, right? Like, they just have, and off the bench they have Gruda and all these other guys who could win pens. And I mean, Bournemouth obviously have like Evan Nielsen and Semenyo and Cliver, whatever. But it's true.
And obviously, it's just, how much time do you actually spend in the box, that sort of thing. So even if you think about like I know these sort of things are obvious, but think about Chelsea or someone, you think about Parma's penalties, and you maybe struggle to think of as many pen winners. I don't know, you probably still get a few. But
João Pedro was the biggest winner of pens for Brighton last year, right? And now he's on Chelsea, so that's a big one.
And I think that's probably, I mean, we're going too far into individual players, but I think that's he's quite a deceptive player, because he's actually quicker and more skillful than he looks for a 6'2", whatever he is. Player, and I think he's quite deceiving in that way, so that's probably why he wins penalties. But obviously they at least spend a lot of time in the opposition box, so that's always something. So that's something to think about with Paquetá. I mean, it's great, but how many penalties are they going to win? You have to think that although it's random, it is lower than some of the other guys.
And you sort of have to accept your fate with, like, you can't really, there's no benefit to getting someone like a Paquetá, and if he blanks 2 or 3 games in a row, getting rid of him. You're losing all of the Paquetá value if that's the way you treat him. Like, it's a short-term pick with fixtures or something like that. You really should be holding him for, I don't know, 7 at least, or something like that, where you could get a nice big chunk of data and be like, are the DEFCONs hitting the way I thought they would? Is he attacking enough for me to be happy? I mean, I remember having this conversation pre-Gameweek 1 where I was leaning Declan Rice in sort of July-ish with my early tinkers. Because I was thinking, okay, obviously he's incredible at corners. He's incredible at free kicks. He kind of has those avenues. He also, in tougher games, should be, in my head, a DEFCON monster, right? Because when he, like you saw in the Liverpool game, he's just played almost a third center back. He was so deep and he just swept up everything. He was a machine that game. And then in the easier games, the Leeds 5-0s, he gets forward and he's like a box crashing 8, So in my head, I was kind of like, wow, maybe I can thread the needle of like, he's good when in an attacking fixture, he's DEFCON in a bad fixture, and he has other avenues. And ultimately where I settled, and I'm not saying this is right or wrong, it has been so far, but that could always flip on its head. But where I ultimately settled is I think I'm not getting enough of any of the above. I don't think I'm actually getting enough attacking in those good fixtures that I'm happy with it. And I don't think I'm nailed enough to get the DEFCONs in the bad ones. And what we've seen so far is he has 2 assists on corners. The only game he's DEFCON is Liverpool. But in open play, his attacking has been like very insignificant.
Mm-hmm.
So, it'll be someone like him is also interesting where it's like you could possibly thread that needle and he's just unbelievable FPL pick because you can play him in any fixture, ceiling in the easy fixtures, floor in the bad fixtures, doesn't matter. But you could also just barely miss those and then it's terrible. And then he's like a nothing pick.
Exactly. And that's exactly why, for me, at the moment, if you're thinking about, for example, our conversation or Walsh's team and so on, is I really like them or Paquetá for what they are, which is a 5.9 midfielder and someone who is going to be on the periphery of my team a little bit. So that's what I want from them at the moment because I'm not confident enough and I want to be able to bring them in and play them in a team. Because obviously he could be even more than that. I know, of course. Yeah. But at the moment, I want to be able to bring him in for Brentford at home and play him and be really happy, but then be really happy when I bench him away at Chelsea or away at Liverpool or you know what I mean? And even if he scores there, I was happy and I'm happy afterwards because I view him as that and that's what I want him as. So do you know what I mean? So that's what what we're looking for is that gem at that price. And I think we potentially have that with Paquetá, potentially.
Yeah.
Not necessarily. I mean, potentially. And I'm really happy with that. So then that's where I put him. I put him in his place, which is a pawn. It's one of the pieces on the edge so that I can facilitate the bigger guys.
Right. So let's talk about Europe a little bit. How much are you factoring like Europe starting? I mean, essentially as soon as we get back, there's UCL midweek. The week after that, there's Europa. The week after that, there's Conference League. So that's how many teams is that? 8, I think, Prem teams or something involved in that? 7 or 8. Does that matter for you? Does that affect your minutes projection? Are you raising teams who aren't in Europe? Are you lowering teams who are in Europe? How do you sort of approach that?
I mean, generally, I don't. Again, apart from extreme scenarios, so I guess put to one side straight away. If I don't know why, but I think if it's like Europa and it's Thursday to Sunday, I think first of all, that's consistent, isn't it? Although I guess sometimes they might get Monday, but it's not like you get a Tuesday Champions League or a Wednesday and then you might get a Saturday or a Sunday.
No.
Thursday, Sunday is way worse than all the other European stuff.
Yeah.
So and obviously, usually teams in the Europa League are teams that maybe have smaller squads or are not as good a team, and so it becomes more a significant impact anyway. So so I put that to one side, and just generally that's pretty bad, and we see it so consistently, don't we? In terms of a team going Thursday to Sunday, really frustrating actually, and just frustrating for the league and the quality of the league and everything. I'm just like, surely there's a better way around this sort of thing. But so that aside, obviously there's then Champions League, and I think generally, I think about the team and the manager and the squad. If it's a Pep Guardiola and it's a City player, it's more significant. It's got to be more significant because he's happier to rotate.
Mm-hmm.
Just as simple as that. I don't know. There are managers who are not as happy to rotate. I think Maresca is probably one, for example. Although we're not entirely sure about that.
We're not sure because Conference League was so weird, right? He could legitimately play a B team and waltz to the title, so we don't really know what he'll do in Champions League.
So someone like Emre, or trying to think of someone who we're pretty confident. I mean, Emre could have had Europe. I mean, someone like Rodgers, you just I don't care if he's playing Tuesday, Wednesday Champions League. I know it's not this year, but do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
That would be where I wouldn't let it enter. It's too much detail for me. And actually, for me, you're potentially disrupting a kind of solid process. And I don't want narratives to creep in. I don't want me to be convinced. I don't want to convince myself of these minutes unless I see it happen. I have to see it happen with certain players who I probably haven't brought in yet anyway, because I haven't seen it happen, if you see what I'm saying.
Yeah.
It does get fuzzy. I mean, the good example this week is João Pedro. And for people like me on Wildcard, where and it's fuzzy because A, bit like you just said with Maresca, we're not entirely sure, but B, also we haven't necessarily seen it with the player so much. I don't know in terms of what they're used to. So João Pedro, for example, some players, you know, that they've spent years, you know, playing Tuesday, Wednesday, Saturday, Sunday every single week, whether it was Mane at Liverpool or, you know, someone like that. No doubt, you know, it doesn't matter. They're a fitness monster and they don't get injured ever. Someone like Cunha, we don't really know. When we've seen already, it doesn't look good in terms of what his muscles can maybe do or what he's used to, because you know that EFL Cup game he plays 90 minutes, and that's probably why he pulls his muscle on Saturday, which is like, that's kind of new information, and why in hindsight maybe that was a bit risky, a little bit, to an extent, a little bit, because we don't really know the muscles or how they cope. And so that's when it does factor in. So João Pedro was playing South America last night at midnight or whatever. He's playing in La Paz. You know, and I am really thinking, but at the same time, he's obviously quite talismanic for them at the moment. He's important. He's the best. You know, he's with Palmer injured, he's pretty much the best player or the best attacker.
But not on pens. That was new information
not
for
on
us.
Pens, probably as well. I don't think it was a gift. I think he's just probably not on pens, which is big. But you know, so he plays on Saturday, and then he plays Wednesday Bayern Munich, which is a big, tough game, and then he plays Saturday again or something like that against United or something, and then he plays Wednesday again or something like that. And so
that's tough. Yeah, I haven't specifically thought about him, but that is really brutal, especially with the size of their squad. And I mean, you look back at João Pedro's history. I mean, even when he was in the championship, he wasn't one of those guys who's playing, you know, 30, 40 games and 4,000 minutes. He was still barely hitting like 2,700 minutes, which says maybe he's not the fitness monster that you want him to be.
Exactly, and we just don't know yet. We don't know. We can sometimes find out quite quickly. I mean, some people's bodies are just built. I mean, I don't know, Bruno Fernandes is someone who just comes to United and straight away you can just play every game, and he's just Salah. You know, there's some people are just not only monsters, but their muscles, they just don't get injured. You know, they've just got perfectly crafted bodies physiologically, and some, you know, we just don't know yet with some players. So that's always significant, but it gets dangerous, especially when we are talking about a really good player who's talismanic. I think you've got to weigh that a little bit more than the worry about the minutes, because obviously sometimes again, you know, us as viewers, we have to be aware of the fact that as FPL managers or whatever and players, that we're worrying more about the minutes than the managers are or the players are, you know, and it's a bit more black and white for them. And like, if someone's the best player, they're going to play unless they're like, there's a big red flag or there's some kind of physio stuff going on, or you know, whatever it is. They're not really thinking about like that necessarily. Yeah. They're obviously cautious, but they're asking the question, like, is he good to go? Is he ready? Is he ready after these two? We need him. Every game's so important. They're going to play.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I do think you have to be careful, but it's just about the team, the manager, the type of player, what other options are available, and what they're used to. You know, so Liverpool are pretty relevant going into that now. Like, what does that look like?
Yeah.
And I think that's really interesting. And again, so someone like Wirtz, because he doesn't, I view it, and you can correct me if I'm wrong because you know more than me, but I kind of view him as actually very good, because I don't really see anyone as his. I mean, I know Szoboszlai could play there or whatever, but I think he's pretty solid for minutes because he's just the 10 and he's just the best in that position. You know,
yeah.
And yes, he may not be used to the. I don't know what. Maybe he is used to it, or I don't know. But it's going to be pretty intense either way, because it always is in the Premier League. Because you got to play harder and faster in the league, and then you got to play in Europe, and then harder and faster. Blah blah blah. But he's one where, so yeah, I would kind of see it as, okay, the minutes are going to probably will get subbed off a bit more. It's going to go from maybe 85 minutes to 77.
77. You know? Yeah, I was going to say the same number. Yeah.
Which, you know, isn't a huge amount. So again, I sort of approach it. It depends how much. If I really rate that player and I really like them and I like their fixtures and I think they're going to start all the games, which is the key bit, you know, I'm kind of okay with that. I'm not making, again, I'm not strong system 2 player who's going into FPL review and adjusting these minutes by 6 minutes, and then the EV goes down by 0.4 and it goes just below someone else who's just slightly above, and that's just not where I'm at. That's not how I'm operating.
Yeah.
So I suppose a long-winded way of saying, that's also a weakness. Like suddenly I'm a little bit caught off guard by Europe because I'm like, I haven't really been thinking about that, to be honest, because I don't really think about it. You know what I mean?
And then we're going to think about it a lot coming soon. Like those lineups come out on Saturday morning. It's going to be like, oh my God, no, blah, blah, blah. Arsenal have the early game and then they have Champions League midweek, away Bilbao. Like, there's, always a mess with players coming back from South America. And then,
especially this weekend will be absolute madness. But you know what, in line with that point is, I suppose what I didn't say was, and maybe this isn't proportionate, but what I do as well is I'd really like those guys who aren't involved in any Europe or any kind of midweek game for various reasons. Obviously it's not just the minutes, but it's also less chance of injury and uncontrollable things and games that aren't even in. So you look at someone like Semenyo. Bournemouth aren't in any European competition, are they? I can't even remember.
No, Semenyo still plays for what is it, Ghana? I think maybe.
Yeah,
but
but
no Europe.
Yeah, and obviously United players, and so that's why you look at Cunha in even more, because it's like no Europe at all. So that's not just the minutes, but it also means that they get extra time to train and extra chilling and extra everything, extra recovery. So
I'm with you on Bournemouth. I'm a huge Bournemouth guy, and I think Areola is just like the next best manager in the world right now, and giving him a week when half the league, almost half the teams in the league have 2 days to prepare, I think is just a huge edge for them. I mean,
it's a good point. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Last maybe thing, and then maybe we'll try and wrap it up, just to not make it, because we could talk, as FPL Last Resort people know, we could go 3 hours here, but we can't do that.
No, I literally just been saying to myself in my head, oh, stop. We need to remember this is not our pod. Like, it's going quicker.
Yeah, no, but it's about you. It's a fireside. It's also not my pod. It's about you. So I want to go back to your sort of process and your sort of decision making. And I think maybe the last logical place to end is just captaincy, which, I was surprised to see that you captained Cunha. Not that I think he's a bad captain. I just didn't know that that's kind of like where you would be. Like, you feel more like a Bruno capper to me than a Cunha capper. So I'm kind of wondering, like I mentioned at the beginning, I've been taking a big step back from FPL stuff. Like, I'm trying to just look at my team, think about who I think is the best captain. I mean, basically what I'm trying to say is I'm trying to be the only one validating my decisions. Can I explain to myself why I'm making every decision I'm making? And I think that's leading to me feeling better about my picks, whether they work or don't work. So how is captaincy kind of like narrowed down to you? Does it start with like your team? Does it start with fixtures? Does it start with FPL review? Or like how do you sort of approach captaincy week to week?
Well, in terms of like the Cunha captaincy, and like I will and always have looked for logical risks or logical free risk, or whatever you want to call it, as in like logical low ownership players.
Right.
Where I can fully justify it, because I have to be able to justify it. Otherwise, I'm not doing anything random. I'm not doing anything on a punt. I'm not doing it just on a willy-nilly. I'm doing it if I genuinely, and I've looked at that, obviously, with Cunha and thought, probably Bruno is better over 1,000 games, and he has the penalties and he has the free kicks and all that sort of stuff. He's a slightly better pick, and I think he was a fair bit ahead on the models, to be fair. But I felt that Cunha was a little bit better than the models, and thought that not that that's going to dictate, which it clearly didn't dictate my decision. But I'm happy to go with something that's maybe slightly suboptimal or slightly worse than what is objectively the best if I think it's very close and it's very good and hardly anyone's on it. And I always have. And the classic one was Magnus Carlsen. That was his entire approach really to the game. And it got him to world number 1 once. Obviously,
I remember that.
Yeah. With him being, and he finished 10th once. That's combined with him being a very rational and logical manager. But he's the extreme example of what I'm saying, which I've always done as well, in a way, is he would really, proactively look for. He would plan 4, 5, 6 weeks ahead to have the guy who he thinks is like objectively very good that week, who no one else will own, because he gets a chance to captain it, and he's increasing his variance and his kind of
We always say, like, if a player feels, and I'm making these numbers up, these aren't like, Rob T numbers or whatever, but if two players feels sort of 55, 45%, like maybe Bruno Cunha is a good example, but in actuality, people are captaining 90, 10%, or maybe even more extreme with Bruno Cunha. Maybe it was 95 and 5%. Then you should captain the 5% guy, right? Like that gap of, like, I don't know what to call it, EV or whatever, of 40% is like where you can, fly up the ranks and have a absolutely huge score. Yeah.
And it's not even necessarily that you should, but I think that you should be happy to.
Yes.
I think that you should be open to, because that's an objective. It says that actually says a lot about your process. It's like an objective approach. Like, most people won't do that because they're scared of not being part of the group, because of people are generally more scared of of negative consequences than they are of kind of an incredible outcome. If the whole group is doing something different, as humans, we want to be part of the group. We've evolved that way. It's literally wired into our brains to be part of the troop. That is how we are literally made. So we see it all the time in FPL, all the time. That's why everyone goes in. It's a big reason. I know template is there for a reason, but it's massively magnified because we all want to be part of the group. So when you enter that group of Twitter and X and everything like that, in many other ways, you potentially, it's a detriment to your game, because you are making yourself much more vulnerable to the processes that are wired into our brains that we've evolved to be. Whereas someone like Carlson, for example, he doesn't give a shit. He doesn't know about Twitter. He's just at home, and when he's not playing chess, he's playing FPL, and he's just looking at it completely logically without any fear. And he's not part of a troop or not part of a troop. He's just doing what he thinks is going to give him the best chance of actually winning the game.
Which is all we want to do, right? Like, that's the funny part about this content creation and Twitter and Discord and all this bullshit. All we really want to do is just make the best decision to try and win the game. But there's so much stuff in the way.
Yeah, we don't all want to be together in the top 100K. Yay, we're all together. Yeah, I'm happy. No, but I've never thought like that. I think I said it when last pod you were on, when I was like, I'm always looking at who's world number one. Well, I am, because even if I know I'm not going to win the game, but I'm still trying to get to world number one. I don't care. Yeah. That's just the way. That's the way it should be. So, I mean, I've always looked for that opportunity. It's kind of even more scary these days because the template is even bigger, and because it used to be, even 2 years ago, if you had, like, because of the engaged managers, I mean, most of your average casuals wouldn't have captained Bruno, right? In terms of, like, the millions and the masses wouldn't have captained Bruno last week. But in terms of the engaged managers, i.e. the people who are watching, subscribe to YouTube, Andy Let's Talk, and Raptor, and and Focal, and all these guys, and we're talking now about millions, a million or more, 2 million. I don't know. These guys have got 500,000 subscribers. So now this engaged bubble that's captaining someone who, like, the models think are the best, because that's where it's filtering down from often, with Bruno, for example. You're going against a million odd or 2 million, which it can be nice, which has its benefits, but also it's even more scary.
Yeah.
And it can be even more detrimental. And so it's kind of funny how that dynamic's changed. But generally, my approach is always, like, I try and pull myself away from all of those biases, and where am I most comfortable? Who is logically the guy who I think is going to get the most points? And even if it's like, or just about the most points, and maybe with that bonus of really low ownership, I don't go for random picks like you used to when you're a casual player. I remember captaining Theo Walcott, and I remember on Boxing Day checking it and thinking it was actually going to be a good pick, and it's like, no, it's Theo Walcott. Like, when you play the game seriously, you don't do that sort of shit anymore, So I don't know if that's a really obvious, like, boring answer, but it's pretty much. I mean, captaincy is the biggest thing in the game, so it's the most important thing in the game, but it is also where the most opportunity lies week to week. And I know, thinking of LR, because you mentioned Aguero, like, he loved those days, and he misses those days of Aguero, where it was more of an opportunity then. I think he was a really good example because his minutes were so kind of all over the place, but I don't know, it would be slightly different these days somehow, because people are so much more engaged about how many would go there. It wouldn't be just like 1 in 1,000. There'd still be a lot more people doing that kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, by that logic, if you're just using ownership, like, we should be captaining Haaland every week until he's back to being 60% owned or more. It's ridiculous, right? If you want to find the hat trick potential guy, any single week he can do it, who's underrepresented, it's him.
No, it's a really good point. It's a really good point, because that's where you could. I mean, there are people. So there are analytic managers who are very, very good analytics managers. I can think of, in terms of proper analytics, in terms of proper. I'm going to get into what I mean by that, but so I think Trout, who's called James, who's a brilliant guy, really nice guy, and he's part of the guys who created Solio. So he looks for that. He looks for that low ownership, logical opportunity, as wholly as he can in terms of that shapes his whole team. So he, for example, did very consciously start the season, I think, or he wildcarded like last week, something like that, with Haaland, yeah. And even though all his models are telling him that Salah's, a bit better or quite a bit better over the long term, so his whole team or his whole approach is based on exactly what you just said, really, and kind of making that bet, which is a very reasonable, logical bet to back someone like Haaland, who could easily just outscore Salah. And that's actually, so that's where he is really exploiting now this extreme template of like, so few people will do that, who are the engaged, serious managers. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Hardly any really engaged, serious, good managers, for example, went Haaland instead of Salah game week 1, along with all the other sort of stuff that's kind of a logical risk. You know what I mean? And that's really interesting, because he's playing to win the game. He's only playing to win the game. He's not bothered about getting a regular top 10K.
I love that.
With that approach. And that is really interesting. And that's the sort of thing that possibly maybe Carlson would do. I don't know. Maybe not actually, but
yeah, I think people don't do that enough. But I to be fair to the general people or whatever, most people are just trying to win their fucking work mini league. Most people are just trying to beat their father-in-law, and they're just like, just tell me who the best captain is. I don't fucking care about OR1. I don't even know what OR means.
Yeah.
So fair enough. But we're playing for different reasons. And I'm more on that sort of side of just trying to, like, I'm okay with taking one on the chin and everyone being like, oh my God, FML FPL captain, blah, 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 the idiot, fuck, and just like, whatever. Because I think, there is a lot of still, I think everyone complains that the template is too strong and everyone has the same team and all this stuff. And there's still so many calculated risks that anyone could take. There's still someone's going to finish OR1, right? It's not like there's some 5,000 identical teams who tie for OR1. That will never happen.
No, exactly. No, and I forget now, just talking to you now, that you obviously do have Haaland, and I think you started with Haaland and Salah or something, didn't you?
Started with Haaland and Mo, same as last year.
Yeah. And this is the great thing, because you said you sort of detach yourself from this season more, the content and stuff like that, and you're not picking that team, I don't think, to try and be different or anything like that, or to try and do. You're picking the team just because you think it's the best team.
Yeah,
which is all that matters.
Yeah, and I mean, honestly, the Haaland thing, not to dwell on it too much, but I did captain him this week. I had Bruno Weiss. It almost happened. Right? Like that. Watch that first half again. I mean, Haaland could have had a hat trick in 20 minutes in that first half. It was insane. And then everyone would have transferred him in, and he would have been 85% owned going into this week, and everything would be very, very different. But since it didn't happen, his ownership is still low, meaning his captaincy will still be low. And, he's still that guy. Still hat trick potential every week until proven otherwise. So something to think about there. So who are you capping this week?
It'll be Salah. Like, this is one of those weeks where it's not logical for me. Like, I'm not. It's not.
I agree.
So it'll be Salah. Although I am interested to see what happens with Salah in the next few weeks and with Isak and stuff like that. And how does it change in any way? But at the moment, and to be honest, I've seen a lot of people talking about free hits and people Haaland this week. This is probably a little bit of Man United bias, but I just don't. I don't like it. I wouldn't be captaining a City player against United. I know we've been bad for so long, but we're one of those where it's a bit of an unknown. Which I just see Amorim as a bit of an unknown, and we have got very good players and we can show up. I don't like unknowns. Right. Kind of the other thing with the captaincy is like who is the opposition? Is it Wolves, where we know how they're going to approach a game and we know, that kind of thing. I don't like unknowns, whatever that looks like. Defensive teams or your Fulhams and stuff. These sort of teams that are beating Bournemouths.
I'll be honest. I'm okay with it. Like, if I was free hitting, which I'm not, I think I would 100% of Haaland in my team. I don't know if I would cap.
Yeah, you can have him. Yeah, I wouldn't cap him myself. But
I mean, the thing I feel like with Man United is that like I could see Man United winning this game.
Yeah, totally.
That wouldn't be shocking, really.
We've beaten City, Pep City with much worse players,
worse manager and worse players, and the thing is also, I mean, the trend of last season and what we saw identical to what just happened in the Brighton game is they played really well and then they fell apart and they got tired and Rodri ran out of legs and yada yada yada, and that could easily happen again, right? It looks like for a half, Haaland's the best pick in the game. Not having him, not having Bob, not having Reinders is crazy. And then they just fucking fall apart. And no one's surprised. So, yeah, we'll see. It's going to be a really interesting derby.
Yeah, and this is the weird thing generally about Haaland, and is that again, when you think of them sort of broadly, holistically, and like Haaland seems to be that he himself and what he can do is he's right on it at the moment. He's super fit. Did you see for Norway last night, by the way?
No. Oh yeah, 5 goals or something, right?
Yeah, 5 goals, 2 assists, and he gave the penalty to someone else.
Unbelievable.
He's one where, he individually, like it looks like it's going to him more than ever, and he looks really good and he looks really on it. But the guys around him don't look as good. Whereas, I don't know, like with Salah, it's like the guys around him look even better, and we're not really sure if it's going to him as much.
Yes, right.
So what's around them is changing quite a bit, and it's actually really interesting to watch and to see how that pans out, because as an individual, you feel great about Haaland. But I don't really know what to think about City generally at the moment.
It just feels like Pep is doing some weird science experiment where he's like, what if no one gets chances except one guy? Can we make that still like a competitive Champions League winning type of team? Yeah. That's what's crazy about City, is that they're obviously good. They're obviously going to finish top 4, but no one is allowed to shoot or get chances except one player.
Yeah. And it's also mad how precarious and how much of a bet that is. Like the entire foundation of this $1 trillion business and team at the moment is based on one Norwegian. And if Roy Keane goes in and just like snaps his leg out of nowhere, I mean, that's it. City are gone. What they're going to be?
You say City are gone, they'll put Bernardo Silva at top and win the treble or something. Because
true,
he'll just go back to like playing normal football and they'll just win stuff.
It'll be that image of Gundogan. Like, what was it? That image when he just like saw the bat signal or something. Oh no, he's looking in the mirror and just like, I can't remember what it was. It was some classic meme. But yeah, Gundogan back to the old days up front or something.
Yeah, exactly. All right, dude. Thank you again, obviously, for coming on. This was a blast, and talk soon. And good luck with your wild card, and send me your team. And I'm looking forward to checking it out.
Yeah, appreciate it, man. And I'm sure you'll be on our pod again soon, and hopefully we'll be chatting in no time. So, nice one.
Hell yeah.